Hi, everyone. So let's talk about addictions. Um, whether it's addiction to food, whether it's addiction to alcohol or drugs, whether it's addiction to sex, whether it's gambling, whether it's shopping, whether it's hoarding, right? I want to discuss hoarding for sure. What is addictions about and why do we do it? Do we even recognize, what addiction is? Let's try to break that down. So, um, I have spent, I would say, about 15 years, at least, if not 20 years, working in the field of social work. And in that, I have actually spent many years working as a therapist in a residential treatment program for adult addicts in recovery. And I've also spent a considerable amount of time working with adolescent boys in a residential treatment program. Not to mention, addiction's been in my family. My grandfather on my mother's side was an alcoholic, died very young because of alcohol issues. And, it, you know, currently, over the last 15, 20 years, I've had many uh, immediate and not so immediate family members that have dealt with addictions, not to mention, this is what I've done professionally. So when I speak to you, I speak to you from a professional standpoint, but I also speak to you from personal experience. And of course, I've used not drugs. I've used food as a drug, as an addiction for sure to medicate my emotions. So let's try to understand where that. Now, before I forget, I want to recommend a really good book by Gary Zukov. Sorry, forgot the name for a second. He wrote a book called The Seed of the Soul, which is excellent, but that's not the book I'm recommending. Although that's a great read, it's a you must read it. But Heart of the Soul is what I strongly recommend if you want to understand more about addictions and how that works. He wrote that with I forget her name. I think it's Linda. It's he considers her his divine spiritual partner. And that book really, in spite of my years of experience and working in the field, it really helped me recognize my own addictions. And I've had multiples over the years that I've finally been able to recognize. So, I think addiction is when you do anything in excess. So, yeah, exercise can be addicting, but it tends to be a positive thing as long as it's not hindering, right? Anything that you are using as a crutch to not deal with usually emotional stuff is an addiction, right? So why do we eat? I know that if I when I'm stressed, I tend to reach for my Lindor truffles, or I eat for that. I don't eat. I'm a vegetarian now, but I used to want to eat a cheeseburger, right? Or right now I eat pizza. Um, when I'm stressed and I'm emotional, I will, want to go shopping to distract myself, right? If I was drinking and I don't drink anymore, I would want to have a glass of wine. I would want to have a drink. A lot of people, they want to smoke, when they're stressed and emotional. I know plenty of people who, um, you know, when they use sex as a drug, that's also used as a distraction. They want to have sex if they're having a great day, just like someone would want to have a glass of wine, or they want to have sex when they're having a bad day, just like someone would, smoke a cigarette, because again, they're just using sex as a drug to numb whatever emotional pain they're experiencing that they don't want to feel, they don't want to deal with. And so, who determines whether you're addicted? Well, I think usually, it needs to be your own insight, obviously, right? That you kind of need to recognize that, because, people can tell you that you're addicted but unless you're ready and willing to see the truth for what it is, you're not going to change. Simple as that. And even if you see the truth for what it is, even once we recognize that we're addicted to food or to, whatever, alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, whatever it is, um, even if we do that, um, we can't stop immediately, because this is a pattern of behavior that is what we're used to, and habits take time to break. And then we also have relapse, right? So relapse, which means Relapse is basically going back to doing the behavior that you were doing to begin with. Relapse is part of recovery. That's a saying in recovery. If you are in the field, you recognize that. If you're in recovery, you've heard of that. So it's normal, and it's okay to relapse and slip back into whatever addiction whether it's alcohol, drugs, food, sex, shopping, whatever it is. It's normal to slip back into old patterns of behavior, because the key is to slip back less and less and less, right? So if I did, for example, if I reached out and had bad foods, fatty foods every time I was emotional, but instead now I'm meditating, or I'm swimming, or I'm exercising, or I'm writing poems, or I'm painting, I have safer and healthier coping skills. That's great, but I still might slip up that, but at least I'm slipping up maybe once every few months versus every day or every week, right? So that helps, and eventually the goal is to always better ourselves to you not slipping up. I want to talk about hoarding. What is hoarding? Excuse me. So hoarding is a phenomena that is very misunderstood. I've heard, there's a movie show in America, at least, that we show hoarders, right? Hoarders are basically people who hoard. Hoard means to collect things, to not let things go. So hoarders will literally save everything. They will save an old marker. They will save old, for example, when you order Chinese food, right? And they have the little black, containers that you get the food in. They'll save that. But yeah, we all save a few of those, but we reuse them and we get rid of them, right? But hoarders will save everything. They won't throw anything away, to the point where it becomes a safety hazard. It becomes a health hazard. Literally, you can't walk in their house because there's piles of stuff all over the place. So why do they do that? Do they just, what is it? They're just crazy people. Like, we love that label, right? Everything that we don't understand that might have something to do with, emotionals, we just label as crazy. No, they're not crazy. Let me explain what's going on with hoarders. The things that hoarders collect, right, that a person has a hard time letting go of, represents certain things in their life that they're missing. Okay? So if hoarders will hold on to, if they've had loss in their life, if they've been rejected, if they're dealing with a lot of things that are out of control in their life, this is something they can control, right? Same thing with addiction. Hoarding is a type of addiction. Addiction is being able to control something, right? In hoarding specifically, you're controlling what goes into your house, and that thing ends up representing a feeling of safety, a feeling of security. That thing will not reject you. That thing will not go away unless you throw it away, and they're not going to throw it away. That thing will not, speak back to you. That thing provides a form of emotional comfort and support just by the presence of it being there. Hoarders are usually people that are really hurting, really hurting. Now, let's understand what pain is and what trauma is, right? Pain and trauma is very different for every person. So two people can experience the same event and respond or react to it very differently based on their own background, their own upbringing, their own emotional makeup, among other things. So, it's not our place to judge, hey, this happened 5 years ago. Why are they just responding to it now? This happened 3 months ago. Why are they responding to it now? Or I went through it and I was fine. Why are they breaking apart now, right? First of all, everyone's emotional, temperature and breaking point is different. So what one might be able to handle, the other one might not, and vice versa. So I don't think it's our place to judge. And trauma comes in ripple effects. So, one thing we've learned since I've gone through my EFT training recently, the one thing I've learned is trauma literally can come up to the surface 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years later. I recently had a trauma that I didn't even know I had get triggered by something last week. I went to go watch this amazing play Stories. That's a Broadway style musical production of our Ismaili Muslim immigration experience, and there was stories about how different Ismaili Muslims from different parts of the world migrated to the U.S. and why we left our countries and whatnot. And you know, something I saw on stage basically triggered a childhood memory for me, and I was very surprised because I knew I had experienced this intellectually. I remembered it in my memory. It's not like I'd buried it, but my emotional response about what I had experienced, it happened to be Hindu Muslim riots in this sense. That as at an 8, 9, 10 year old, there were riots happening in Bombay, and I remember, all of a sudden I was right back there. And as an adult, for some reason, it was, I went back to being an 8, 9, 10 year old, and it was quite emotional for me, and to realize, wow, that was pretty intense. I mean, I came out of it safe, obviously, but so the point is, trauma comes up differently for different people. It's like, when you throw a pebble in a calm lake and you see the ripple effect, the ripple happening, right? The inner, immediately the first, people who respond immediately are the inner ripples. People who respond, eventually are the outer ripples, right? But the trauma, it still affects people. Also, people immediately affected by the event might respond or react immediately, versus people who are distant from the experience, might still have trauma, but in a different form. 9/11 is something I use all the time, and of course now Parkland and all the school shootings. It's quite sad. That's a whole different talk. But to come back to hoarding, I think hoarding is not something they can control. It's not something that they can, let's just clean their house. Because, I've seen shows where they've gone in and they've tried to work with a therapist. And I really sort of, was frustrated when I was watching this show, because the therapist was not addressing, in my humble opinion, the core reason why the person was hoarding to begin with. The hoarding is not about the things. It's never about the things that a person is collecting. Hoarding is about the emotional meaning that they're attaching to the things that they're collecting, right? So whether it's, name brand purses or name brand clothes that are full with tags hanging, or whether it's literally stacks of newspaper, it's irrelevant, right? So I think let's, I mean, I work in the ER, you guys know that. And I was talking to a couple of the nurses there, and, they were like being very judgmental. And, I would imagine, I assumed that because they were nurses, they had more compassion, they would understand mental illness. And what I'm realizing in my conversations with my peers is that that's not always the case, actually. Just because they work in a hospital does not mean, and they understand health, they understand body. I mean, I see these nurses do what they do, and I'm blown away. But they definitely don't understand, mental health issues. So I think let's understand. Let's show some compassion. Let's not be so quick to judge that it's something they can control. This particular episode I was talking about, this person, was able to go in, and this therapist was able to help almost negotiate. Okay, we'll get rid of, 5 of these pillows that you have 20 of. And, a week later, the person had replenished them and added a few more, right? Because again, it's not about the things. It's about the meaning attached to the things. And so unless you deal with the initial traumatizing experience or event, to neutralize that and to release and heal that pain, this other external stuff is not going to matter. It's not. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful. Please feel free to comment. And someone had mentioned earlier, can I speak in Hindi? And I would love to, except it's not that मैं हिंदी नहीं बोलती हूँ, it's just that मेरी हिंदी बहुत अच्छी नहीं है, और मैं हिंदी में बहुत ज़्यादा अपने आप को express नहीं कर सकती हूँ. And plus, I think the people who usually watch this are speaking English. So माफ करना मैं हिंदी में नहीं बात कर सकती हूँ क्योंकि it's just that's not who the audience is, and that's not, and I myself am not very comfortable completely being fluent in Hindi. मैं हिंदी बोलती हूँ, गुजराती बोलती हूँ, I guess उर्दू भी बोलती हूँ by default, but इतनी शुद्ध नहीं बोलती हूँ जो अपने आप को जो vocabulary मेरे say I can't even express myself that way. What I can do in English with the language, I can't express myself that comfortably in Hindi. I'm sure with practice I could, but unfortunately I don't get a chance to practice it. So I pray that you'll forgive me, and I hope this is helpful. And again, love and light to everyone, and God bless. Take care.